Hi, this is Josh Fonger, and welcome to the Work the System podcast, where we help business owners go from just owning a job to owning a true business, mastering their systems so that they can simplify growth. And I'm very excited today to have a special guest, Chuck Coonradt.
Yes.
Chuck, or Charles Coonradt, is the founder and CEO of The Game of Work, which was founded in 1973 and dedicated to the success of its corporate clients. Chuck is a graduate of Michigan State University and internationally recognized in the fields of goal setting and profit improvement as an author, consultant, and speaker. His 5 best-selling books, The Game of Work, The Better People Leader, Scorekeeping for Success, Managing the Obvious, and The 4 Laws of Financial Prosperity, have been labeled management must-reads, and most recently Forbes magazine called Chuck the grandfather of gamification. All right, so Chuck, I'm very excited to have you on this program and kind of pick your brain and learn some of your business theories and how to apply them. But before we get into all of that, how did you get into this line of work, being an author and speaker? How did that happen?
Well, 2 major steps. One is my degree is in supermarket operations. That was my grandfather and my father were grocers. And when I graduated from Michigan State, I went to work in Southern California. So I often describe myself as a box boy with a sheepskin. But it's great industry. Mm-hmm. And then I came to Salt Lake City to work for the Smith's Food King organization, which is part of the Kroger national group now. Mm-hmm. And after about a year, we had an opportunity to affiliate with a franchise company out of Waco, Texas called Success Motivation Institute. And I got started in this business selling about an 8x12 box that had 16 cassette tapes and 2 manuals in it. And as we did that for a few years, we contacted one of our clients, was a publisher, and 3 generations, and they really liked the message we had. And we'd honed the skills around the core material from SMI. And they said, you should write a book. I said, whoa, I do not write. I talk. And then they said 3 magic things. Number 1, we'll publish and distribute it. Mm-hmm. Number 2, we'll provide you a co-author, and all you have to do is talk. And then they mentioned a wonderful word in the publishing industry called royalties. And I didn't realize until they had that conversation how badly I wanted to be an author. So the real credit goes to Lee Nelson, who was my co-author in the first book. And Lee put my voice in it. Mm-hmm. And he's just a masterful craftsman. We'll totally always be indebted to him. But that's how I got to be an author. And they started to distribute it. They didn't do real well with it. So we self-published for a while. And then another publisher picked it up. And then we self-published for a while. So we're up to, 250,000 copies in distribution over that period of time. But that's the author background.
Wow. Well, that's good for me to hear too, because I hate writing, but I like the idea of writing a book someday. So just find a good co-author. And
co-authors.
That's very good. Okay. So tell us about the theories in the book, because these theories have stayed the test of time. And so it sounds like you applied them first to grocery stores, but then you realized they work everywhere. So what are the different theories of gamification?
Well, by the counsel of Michael Gerber, the E-Myth author, mm-hmm. Michael said to me one time as we shared a stage, he said, you really need to tell people your epiphany. How did this come to be? And Michael's very good at his. And so my epiphany was sort of a circumstance where I have my little magic box of talkie tapes and books, and I'm calling on a man who's running a factory-built home, a prefab. They don't like that phrase. So factory-built homes. Factory, and we're on the 2nd floor looking down on the work floor. And he looks at me and he says, what are you and your magic box going to do about that? And he'd already given me the kids today. Kids can't work. Kids don't care. Kids aren't motivated. And he takes me over the window and he points down and says, what are you going to do about that? And that was 8 20-somethings working on a house. And to describe their work pace, you would need words like arthritic, snails, and wet cement. I mean, it was find a nail, find a hammer. It was just terrible. And for those in the audience who are in selling, you know that if you get an objection and you don't have a way to overcome it, the clock stops. And that happened to me. And then I got rescued by lunch, because when the lunch bell went off, those 8 guys dropped those hammers like they were electrified, took off on a dead run like somebody hit them with cattle prods, and ran 50 yards, half of them taking their shirts off, to where they found a basketball hoop. And I watched them on their own time, nobody paid them, play 4-on-4 with the intensity of a Game 7 NBA Finals. And at 12:42, without a strat plan, a management, and a performance appraisal process, a scorecard, or anything else, everybody knew their job and what to do. 12:42, by some silent signal, they stopped, picked up their sack lunches and their sodas, and started walking back to the job site. No reason to hurry now. At 1 o'clock, they're back on the clock, arthritic snails, and wet cement. And I look at this redneck, at least that's what Jeff Foxworthy would call him, and I said, there's nothing wrong with those kids. It's not that problem. And in my mind, this tongue twister occurred, and I have to explain a little bit. But I realized that there was something out there that people would pay for the privilege of working harder than they would work when they were paid. That something happened under that basketball hoop. And so I began to just contemplate. I wouldn't even call this research. It would give research a bad name. But we started to contemplate, what did I see under the basketball hoop that I didn't see when they were being paid to work? And from that came the 5 principles of what we identified as the motivation of recreation.
That's a great story and memorable. I won't forget it now. So these the principles of recreation, what are those principles?
Well, there's 5 of them.
Okay.
And the number one, and the one that when I wrote the book, I didn't realize this was the most important thing we discovered. But the most important thing we discovered is the feedback in recreation is more frequent than it is in work. So we'll go to a golf course, and in 4 hours, we'll get feedback 70, 80, 90, 100 times every time we swing the ball. A tennis match, the same thing. And most of the people who work in today's world in 4 hours don't even know what shape the ball is. So we work 2,000 hours in a normal work year, and we might wind up with a 40-minute performance evaluation process, which is out of sync, outdated, the rest of it. And my impression is that if we all think that the annual performance appraisal is enough, try it in your marriage.
Right.
So when your spouse says, "How was that?" meaning any one of a number of things, I'll let the imagination go. You can simply say, "Don't worry about a thing, dear. We'll just review it in writing on our anniversary."
Right. Yeah. 1 year from now.
Okay. I rest my case on annual performance appraisal. So the feedback is more frequent. And we discovered some things about feedback, and that is the more frequent the feedback, you actually get almost an aspirin effect of improvement in quality and quantity of performance. I don't know that I can exactly explain it, and that's why I use the phrase aspirin. We don't know exactly why it works, it just works. So that's the feedback is the ultimate process, or the ultimate differential. And there's all kinds of experiments about feedback and denial of feedback and the rest of the stuff. But increasing the feedback will increase the performance. That's number one. Number two, we recognize that in recreation, the scorekeeping is contemporaneous. Now, another way to say that is that the people know the score while the game's going on, so they can change their behavior to win before time runs out. We had early in our career, we had a young lady who was McDonald's counter person. And she decided she was going to sell French fries to every person who came in, regardless of what else they ordered. And so she marked down and had this little just check sheet next to the register, whether that person ordered fries or not. And I don't know that she got everybody, but I do remember that she got somebody who came in to order an ice cream cone and walked out with an order of French fries. So knowing the score during the game is critical. And so we ask the question in your business, in your company, to our audience, is your scorekeeping more like figure skating or ice hockey? And in figure skating, the skater doesn't know how they scored until there's no chance to fix it. Nancy Kwan lost a gold medal in Nagano in Japan in one of the Olympics by 1/100 of a point and didn't know it until she couldn't fix it. Contrast that to hockey, where you know the score every minute, you can change your behavior, you change your press line, you can even pull the goalie at the end of the game. If you're too far behind, get another rusher on the ice. So the good question for our audience is, as you look at your scorekeeping with your employees and your team, ice hockey, annual statement, monthly statements, 2 weeks after the month's over, blah, 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 or ice hockey, how do we win today? So one of the things that happens when people complete a game of work installation in their company is that we're focused on everybody knows on a daily basis whether they're winning or losing. And it's kind of a mantra with us to force that scenario that people know whether they're winning or losing. There's a company that has a little kiosk. It's a freestanding thing, and it has four faces on it. I saw my first one in a restroom in SeaTac. But there's a green, big, happy, smiley face, and then there's a yellow and an orange and a red. And the idea is that as you're walking out of the restroom, all you do is you go hit the button, and that way the restroom attendant understands or gets feedback on what they need to do. I've often thought it would be interesting if we installed by the time clock a green, red, yellow button that just says, as you punch out, do you know you won? Did you know you lost? Or did you not have a clue as to what you did today? And that would be a scary, scary feedback system for leaders. Number three, the goals are more clearly defined in recreation than they are in work. So if we go to play Pebble Beach, we get a map at a golf course. We get the par ratings, we get the yardage, we get a number of other things. And in today's technological world, somebody's going to have one of those rangefinder deals, that says this is how far the pin is. Really clear. None of us would go to Pebble Beach and take a weed whacker in our hand, the manual one, and just go out there and swing it 72 times and walk 72 yards along the cart path. You go, well, what a dumb idea that would be. But that's what we do in our businesses too often. So the goals need to be clear. The fourth one that gets a lot of play is they don't change the rules on you in the middle of the game. So if you look in recreation, the elasticity of a golf ball critically, meets a certain standard, can't be hotter than that. Sammy Sosa gets in trouble for corking his bat because that's we're really big on consistency and not change rules. But too often, especially as businesses are coming up out of the ground, and I remember we probably did this in violation of our own principles early, one day we're driving cash flow, the next day we're driving customer experience, and we're going to go, oh, we got a product issue. Now it's gross margin. Well, and we, too often in businesses, we play the corporate or the equivalent of the amusement park game called whack-a-mole. So we go beat this mole down, we go beat that mole down. And we have to recognize as we've implemented this process, that the number one thing that people want in their coach is consistency. Okay, so even if you're, there's a famous generation of coaches, maybe much of our audience won't remember, but Bear Bryant at Alabama, Woody Hayes at Ohio State, Bo Schembechler at Michigan, Bobby Knight, Indiana basketball coach, that were madmen. I mean, we're just raging bulls. Not too politically correct in today's circumstances, but they were consistent. Mm-hmm. Always consistent. You knew what to count on. And even John Wooden, the famous UCLA basketball coach, not the raging bull that we just described, but very, very much a stickler for the standards. First day of practice, he shows you how to put on your socks, because if you don't put your socks on, you get blisters. If you get blisters, you can't play, you can't practice. So consistency is a huge element. So don't change the rules on you, but parenthetically, consistent coaching. And the last thing we realized about the motivation and recreation is that there's a choice. There's some level of personal choice. So I am a downhill skier. I live in Park City, Utah. I ski 3 to 4 days a week in the wintertime, which is why we're doing this interview after the lifts close. But I see no reason as a downhill skier to walk up any mountain that has a lift on it. That would be stupid. But my brethren and sisters in the cross-country ski deal don't have money for heel bindings, but they tell you there's no reason to pay somebody to take you where you can get on your own. So it's a question of choice. My daughter's a skydiver. I see no reason. I have 4 million miles on Delta. I never get out of an airplane if the engine works. Really goofy. But as a certified scuba diver, makes perfect sense to me to put 45 minutes worth of air in my back and go just as far as I can from the next breath. So that element of choice. Now, we're not preaching chaos, okay? And people will agree with ownership and leadership's ability or rights, I think is maybe the word, to set the goals and the direction of the organization. What they'll kill for is being able to go about it in their personalized way. So, you really wouldn't, I know this isn't going to go live, but you and I both know that we had a spectacular event occur this past Sunday when Tiger won. Mm-hmm. At Augusta. Mm-hmm. And, you really don't want to go change Tiger's shot. Mm-hmm. Yep. Tiger, go score, do it the way you want. So what we've found is that when you extend choice on methods and methodology in the company, what you get is buy-in. And too often, as owners or leaders, we go on a retreat, we get away from the real world, go think up a bunch of crazy stuff. And then we come back and we're always whining about, I can't get the team to buy in. Why can't I get the team to buy in, Josh? Mm-hmm. Well, the reason is they had no input into your cockamamie idea. So we get the motivation and recreation to work when you extend choice to people in terms of how are we going to go get this done.
That's great. I mean, each one of these concepts we could mine for hours with the examples. Let's just go through the list one more time, and let's try to dive deeper into each one of these. And I've got a ton of questions. So let's go with the feedback. So you have a business. Let's just say, let's use an example. Let's say you've got a coffee shop. You got a coffee shop. and you've got your people who are making the coffees and making the sandwiches over. How do you give them feedback in a meaningful way, and how consistent would you do it? And would you use technology? Like what would that look like?
Well, the first thing, the first part is to engage them in what kind of feedback would you like? Okay. See, one of our other beliefs that comes out of our work is that we believe that everybody comes to work with one question in their mind, and that is, how do I win? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if I make $15.50 in a coffee shop and I can make $16 in a coffee shop down the street, there's not a significant economic, I mean, I know that's $500 a year, but there's not a significant economic differential between my coffee shop and your coffee shop. But if the people that work in my coffee shop have decided that how many people they serve a day is an important piece of information, then I share that with them. If I say to people, what is the, you should know the average check size if you're a server or a barista in a coffee shop. Mm-hmm. I'm going to share with you that I don't know a coffee shop in the world, because we didn't have any as clients. I don't know a coffee shop in the world that knows what the average check is. Uh-huh. Okay. But I do know that we had a very upscale restaurant and they wanted to sell more desserts. Reasonable, right? Mm-hmm. So we asked the waitresses to track their tips. Don't tell me, you just do it, but graph it, put it into a Game of Work scorecard, and every night when you go home, graph your tips. Well, once they started graphing the tips, guess what there's a relationship to? The size of the check and the size of the tip. So what we found out is that they started to say, well, that's a $500 night or a $350 night, whatever the numbers were. Just being able to ask for the dessert got them more larger checks, more bigger checks, and resulted in more tips. So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be something that the engineers at Apple or Google or Amazon figure out. Mm-hmm. It's really a question of, how do we win at this job?
So helping them define with you what winning looks like in their particular role. So for the waiter or waitress, it's not profitability, it's not opening new locations. It's true to their heart, which is winning means more tips, and more tips means the restaurant sold more food, which means the owner made more money.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. Good.
If you say, and today I think we've lost this a little bit, but because maybe it's part of this overall entitlement thing, but you now get with your check in many restaurants a 12%, 15%, 18%, 20, 25% recommendation as to how much you want to tip, sort of inferring you're not smart enough to figure this out on your own, but also inferring that nobody in the world would tip less than 12%. You'd just be some sort of a putz to do that. Mm-hmm. But if you really say that the tip is to ensure great service, then there's a relationship between I am going to make this, you, the customer, your experience incredible. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's as simple as getting some linkage in the deal.
So teaching them to make the feedback so they can win. What about actual scorekeeping? So you mentioned the ice hockey, how there's actually scorekeeping throughout the whole game. Let's just stick with this high-end restaurant, unless you want to move to another one. How do they make the scorecard available, let's just say, all throughout a busy Friday night? Is there a way to make a scorecard available?
Sure. See, again, it's mostly a mindset. Uh-huh. So every restaurant in the world is going to close out the night. At the end of the night, when there's nothing we can do to fix it, mm-hmm. we're going to get our data. Dumb. Ice skating. Okay. Mm-hmm. But there's really no reason that I can't in 15 seconds in most of those electronic cash register systems now. In 5 seconds or 15 seconds, I can identify how that hour was. I can create how that hour was with last Friday from 7 to 8. Okay? Now, you may create that score. You may have some people that say, I don't care about that. I'm just here. I'm just here to make some money. I don't care about your business. But when you start to tell people when you're hiring them what your system is, and that we do this on a Friday night, and we do a little hoop-de-doo. I mean, you come into almost any restaurant chain now and say it's our birthday, and somebody's going to come over and clap and sing and bang on pans and do the rest of that. Well, why not just have sort of a secret signal that the last hour we just did was a record 7 to 8 p.m. hour in this restaurant forever. Mm-hmm. It's a chime, it's a ding, I'm not trying to be Pavlovian here about how our dogs respond, but it's that idea that you're also saying to your team, we think it's important enough for you to know, and that really makes you a partner in the business. Mm-hmm. Now you can choose to reject that. You can choose to take the mindset, I'm just here for the minimum wage and the tips. I'm just working, I ain't happy about it. Mm-hmm. Or you can say, this is part of our culture. And when you put the scorecards into the hiring interview, that's a terrific sort to see if the people that you're interviewing are people who want to play.
That's right. Okay. So you tell them in advance kind of what kind of culture it is, and some will play, some won't. But I like the idea of at least giving them a chance to see the overall vision, so they can participate. A lot of sales organizations will have a little dinging bell, so they'll kind of ding that whenever a sale is made, so everyone in the office knows.
Yeah.
Sales come in. Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a loan processor. This is one of the weird stories. We had a loan processor in Phoenix, and she was 3 times as productive as anybody else on the team, just head and shoulders above. And so some people were down trying to digitize the process, and they said, well, why is Mary's production? And they said, well, she rings a bell every time she finishes an app. And they're there for a couple, half a day, and they go, well, we don't hear the bell. So the manager goes, well, there isn't really a bell. It's a bell in Mary's head. But Mary, when she finishes an app, Mary just has kind of a, yes, all right, rings the bell, and away we go. So that, and not a client of ours. I have to develop it. Somebody just said, this looks like your stuff. Did you have anything to do with that? Mm-hmm. But yeah, the idea that, we're ringing the bell, we're doing the things, we're doing something that adds value and purpose to the work. Mm-hmm. That's really what feedback and scorekeeping do.
No, I love that. I think that's definitely something I'm going to add to my client work. Is sometimes it's a week delay, it's a lagging indicator, it's a month away or a quarter away, and how do you just get those things in every minute, every hour, as quick as possible while the game is being played? So let's move on to goals. Okay, so we have this high-end restaurant, and we have the team there. You're getting the feedback. What kind of goals do you set? Do you let them set their own goals, or how do you go about doing that?
Well, there's a couple of spaces you can look for your goals. One is ask your banker. Okay. Because your banker will always set your goals for you. If you have a loan, your goal is to make the payments. Okay. And I'm not being, I don't mean to be as facetious about that as I just came off at. But Drucker wrote a book way back in the 60s called managing for results, I think. But the key in that point is Drucker said there are 3 goals in every business, which means you should listen to that. And he said the goals in business are survival, profit, and growth. Now, we've had some disastrous examples of organizations who have violated that. In the tech boom, we had grow, and we had billion-dollar valuations on companies that didn't have a dime's worth of revenue, and dropped a bit. Now, you've got some other ones that have survived that and, gone after it, gone out to create a footprint or create an infrastructure. But, Lyft just went public at some incredible valuation, and they doubled the rides last year and doubled their losses. Now, I'm just telling you, at some point in time, somebody's got to figure that out. So survival, profit, and then growth. And so if you say in your coffee shop or in your 5-person dry cleaning business or any other small, or if it's just you, you say, well, what do I need to do to survive? What does survival look like to me? Well, one is, and one thing we don't talk about very much in business today, is we got to break even. Mm-hmm. Okay, at some stage of the game, every entity of every magnitude, of every funding source, at some point in time has got to break even where the gross margin exceeds their expenses. If you don't do that at some point in time, unless you have some incredibly optimistic funding source, it's not going to get there. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I'm part of an angel investment group, and everybody who presents to us has the the requisite slide deck and income forecast 67 months in advance. And so I just adopted a question that has made me really unpopular with most of our presenters. And that is, help me understand how we're going to keep from going broke while we're fixing to get rich. So show me the path to the first revenue dollar. Show me the path to break even. Show me that you're thinking about doing something besides burning through your angel money to get to an A round and burning through your A round to get to a B round, and help me understand the format of how this thing pencils. Mm-hmm. And because on the other end of that, one of the, obviously the wizard of Main Street, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, we have 2 companies here in Utah that are Berkshire Hathaway companies, and Warren just wants to buy stuff that's simple and simply profitable. Mm-hmm. And he manages them in a really pretty much hands-off kind of a concept, because it's just about selling a widget for less than it costs you to make the widget and selling more of those widgets, et cetera. So I think from a goal standpoint, and especially when you look at the painfully large number of businesses that will not survive year 1, year 3, year 5, survival is a really dandy first level goal. And then taking your goals as an owner or an entrepreneur and translating them into, what do I need from my team in order to survive? Mm-hmm. What I need from my team in order to survive is I need everybody on the organization to contribute more than they're compensated for. Mm-hmm. Now, that might be a difficult conversation to have, because sometimes we don't open up and we don't tell our people that our survival is tied to their survival, and or we get embarrassed. We go, oh, I'm a business owner, and therefore I'm something close to deity, and I don't want to be embarrassed by the fact that I'm scared crapless that I'm not going to make it through the next payroll. Work with the people, say, this is what we're going to do, this is the direction we're going to go, and be clear. And then what's profitable? We need to be profitable. Why do we need to be profitable, Chuck? We need to be profitable so that we know in a slight downturn, I've got something set aside so I can make payroll for the next 26 payrolls. Mm-hmm. That's why we need to be profitable. Oh, okay. I understand that. We in the grocery industry is a funny industry, but I grew up in it, so I can laugh at it, tease it. But across the business, across the world, grocery stores net, I haven't looked at it recently, but by and large, it was just inside 1.5%. Now, let me translate that for you. The average transaction in a grocery store is $25. Now, most people out there who have a family go, can you teach my spouse how to get out of a grocery store for $25? I would pay you a lot of money. But across the board, that's what it is. So 1.5% of $25 is 40 cents. Okay?
So much.
It's 40 cents. Mm-hmm. Now, the lowest paid kid in the store is the bag boy, right? And bags cost money. And in fact, bags can eat up of the 40 cents, bags can eat up 6 cents in a real hurry. So now we're entrusting what is that? We're entrusting 25% of our profitability to the lowest paid kid in the store. And we don't tell him at all what we expect out of him, how much he ought to put in the bag, what a good day is or a bad day is. It's like, Chucky, go get the carts. That's it. So those are just some of the ways that you start to make yourselves aware, but you start to look at what's the value of the transaction. If somebody comes in and orders a $7, I'm not a coffee drinker, so help me with this, but somebody comes in and orders a $7 latte, caramel, vanilla, whatever it is. We make any money on that thing? Because most employees, in the absence of truth, will assume that gross sales equals net profits. And it's our fault that exists.
Yeah, well, that's very true. I often do a demo with my clients where I'll take a dollar bill and I'll explain to them, when a dollar comes into the business, how much does the owner actually keep? And I'll do a demo of this sometime for the podcast. And I will tear apart the dollar bill and explain, the owner is left with this little tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction. And that's profit. And the owner has to decide if they're going to save it, reinvest it, research and development. But there's usually just a little piece left at the end, and that's why everything matters.
And if you're working in a grocery store, you'd have to have a scissors because you couldn't tear a small enough piece to represent that 1.35.
Gosh, that's right. Well, so how about consistent coaching? How does that play out? And we can go restaurant or another analogy, but so if you have a business and you want to provide consistent coaching to your employees, your team, maybe it's a virtual business too. How do you do that without burning up so much time? Because that's pretty time consuming.
Well, so let's say somebody works 40-hour week, 4.3 in a month, 168 or 73. I can't do the math that quick in my head. But anyway, so the question is, out of that 168 hours, how much direction should you give? Our suggestion is that if you're not giving that individual at least an hour a month of good feedback and coaching against the scorecards and against the things that we're doing, that you really are missing it.
Okay, so you're letting them flounder too much without giving them that feedback loop.
Well, and here's the other thing. Here's the Coonradt rule of mostly. Most folks do most of what they do mostly right, most of the time, most places. Therefore, most of that coaching and most of that feedback is deservedly positive or celebratable or reinforcing. Okay? Here's the problem in business. We don't understand how to train a puppy. So if you're training a retriever, you need to do what Skinner, B.F. Skinner, the father of behavioralism, said. Step one is you got to learn how to reinforce the behavior you want repeated. Okay? So when the dog brings you the stuffed phony pheasant thing that you're throwing out there for the retrieve, he brings that back to you. That dog needs to be appreciated. Okay? Because he's doing what you ask him to do. Now, too often we get, with a dog, we get tired of throwing the thing out before he gets tired of bringing it back. And we shut down and give negative feedback going, we're done, Duke. We're done. And that happens too often to us in business. So what we want is we want accurate cashiers and bank tellers. In too many organizations, their report is called overs and shorts. You got to screw up to get listed. Mm-hmm. FedEx wants it to be on time in the right place. Their report's called late and missing shipments. Everybody wants to work in a safe environment. We track accidents. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we work in violation of what we know to be the most basic behavioral change principles in the world. So what we ask our coaches and leaders that train with us is figure out how to make a big deal out of the good stuff you want more of. So what's a perfect load? What percentage of the time or how often when your car comes out of a auto body collision repair shop, okay, is it fixed the way you want it to? We call it fixed right first time. And we have a really good friend who took our concepts and really built a practice with collision repair shops. There are more of them than there are car dealerships. But one of the things that we help Jeff work out in terms of track is how many perfect cars can we roll out of here before we have one that somebody comes back? The answer, all of the places he did, is 8.
Is that a good number?
We don't know, but it's just the number, all right? Uh-huh. So when we start looking at perfect car, perfect car, perfect car, we've got up on the scoreboard somewhere number of cars, almost like, in the World War, in our combat action, air combat action, you get to stencil the bogeys on your fuselage of everything that you knock down. Well, we turned that around and let them put perfect ones up. In fact, we had an opportunity to work with Hill Air Force Base, which now has the F-35 fleet, but for years had the F-16 fleet. And the mechanics got to post on the wall of the shop when they had an airplane out, and they sent the airplane out and they came back and the check ride pilot said, "This is fine." They put another decal up on the wall.
Good, positive reinforcement. No, I love it. I mean, I'm thinking of this for my parenting too with my kids. I mean, all these concepts have got to apply for that as well. We could probably spend hours on that. So last one. So the other piece with coaching is keep the rules the same, keep it consistent, and then you get to personal choice. And if you've been, familiar with Sam's book, part of what we do is try to build the best way to do everything. We build systems, document them, and I'm curious to explore this idea of personal choice. How much choice do you give somebody when you've already kind of predetermined the best way to do something? How much choice do you give them?
Well, in the circumstance that you're talking about, Josh, if you've got the perfect system, okay. Well, let me go back a minute. Aristotle and developed a whole thing called Aristotelian thought. Okay. Now, that's not part of most entrepreneurship classes, but I'm going to make a bridge here. So Aristotle said, he pointed at a table and he said, that's a table. It'll always be a table. Everybody agrees it's a table. That's Aristotelian. Socrates came along and said, you know what? That's not a table unless I think it's a table. Now, there's a great deal of evidence that Socrates was smarter than Aristotle when it comes to people. So your best practice, which is a word that has lots of about it, but your best practice is not a best practice unless I think so. So part of it, here's what we do. We get arrogant with what we've developed. So we say, all right, Coonradt, this is a best practice. Okay? It's inviolate. It's part of scripture. This is a best practice. And by that very phrase, we're saying, don't even think about fixing it. Well, intuitively, I'm looking to make it my own. So what we really need to do as leaders, if we do have a best practice or we do have this is our way, the thing we need to do is not presume or assume that it stands on its Aristotelian basis. And we say, try it a couple of ways, okay? But what I want our best practice to become your best practice as you participate in it. Mm-hmm. But I'm not here to say it's our best practice. If you can't adopt it, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I love that. And we're definitely the same way. We let our teams know this is the best we've come up with so far, but we'd love to make it better, love for them to come up with innovations, ideas, because it's as good as we can do it right now. But of course, there's better ways. Yeah. So give them that opportunity. Wow. Well, this is good. And I think I'm writing a lot of notes here. It's hard. It's easier to talk about this than to actually apply it. I think the hard work is probably actually in being creative enough to solve your real business problems with these things and break your old patterns of doing things. Maybe most people do it just reactionary, but this is more thoughtful business management, and we'll take some time to actually put that in place. Okay. So what can folks do? Because I know we're getting kind of late on the clock here. What can folks do to find out more information about you, about your books, about how to improve their businesses using this kind of gamification? Well,
of course, it's 2019, so there's always a web address. Mm-hmm. And the website is gameofwork.com. All of our books are available on Amazon in a variety of their formats, Kindle book, audio book, hard or soft cover paper. So you can reach out to do that. There are links on our website that you can get a free executive summary mm-hmm. of any one of the 5 books and evaluate that if you choose. There's a way on there to contact us with questions and comments and the rest of it. But remember, I'm a grandfather, and although the grandfather of gamification, I am primarily retired. But if anybody out there has a question, we'd be happy to entertain that via email, etc. So there we are.
Good. Well, again, I appreciate you making the time for this podcast. I know I had to pull a little favor with a friend of mine. And thank you, everybody, for listening to today's podcast at Work the System. Certainly come in, check out again next week, where I'll have another guest like Chuck, share with you a little bit how to grow your business, make it more simple so it can scale. Thanks again, everybody.